The Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project SERAP has filed a lawsuit against the Minister of Power Adebayo Adelabu and the Nigerian Bulk Electricity Trading PLC at the Federal Court in Abuja over the alleged failure to account for 128 billion naira in public funds. SERAP disclosed these in a statement issued on Sunday by its Deputy Director, Kolawole Oluwadare. The group said the suit was filed last Friday following allegations contained in the Auditor-General of the Federation's report released on September the 9th, 2025. In the suit, SERAP is seeking an order of mandamus compelling the Minister of Power and NBET to account for what it described as missing or diverted funds from the Ministry of Power and the Electricity Trading Agency. The organization is also asking the court to compel the disclosure of the full names, official designations, and offices of all public officers authorized or approve the release of the funds. No hearing date has since been released. Joining us is the Deputy Director at SERAP, Kolawole Oluwadare. Good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, now you filed the lawsuits alleging that 128 billion in public funds cannot be properly accounted for, and where exactly does SERAP believe the accountability process broke down?
Thank you very much. I think it's very important to clarify the basis of the suit. The lawsuit is predicated on the Freedom of Information request that we had sent out earlier this month to both the Ministry of Power and the NBET, that's Nigerian Bulk Electricity Trading Company, asking them questions, basically asking them to supply information about a lot of infractions that were raised by the Auditor-General of the Federation in this report. So that is the 2022 edition. And it's the failure of asking those questions, of providing those informations, that has led to this suit. Of course, SERAP, like every Nigerian, is permitted under the FY Act. Go to court to compel public institutions to provide information. And to answer your question simply as to where I think, or SERAP thinks, the accountability system broke down, a lot of it. And I'm very happy that the report of the Auditor-General did not only chronicle what the Auditor-General has found as malfeasance in these organizations, but also alluded to some of the systems that failed. Essentially, the audit found a lot of infractions in the way money was spent. And I think it's very important to put this in context. This audit is about the 2022 or the financial year the Auditor-General has found. Essentially, it's a lot of breakdown of following proper procedures in contracting, the Procurement Act, and simply just spending government money without a due process. And that is why the bulk of those funds have been declared by the Auditor-General of the Federation to be recovered and paid back into public coffers.
Looking at this, saying that it's to be paid back to public coffers. But now, what details in the Auditor-General's report raised red flags strong enough for SERAP to conclude that court actions was necessary?
But, all of it, actually. I think there are about 13 issues raised by the Auditor-General against the Ministry of Power, against NBET, while the Ministry of Power has 4 issues. But understandably, the Ministry of Power is also a supervising agency for NBET. And of course, if NBET, things could not go on in NBET for so long without the knowledge or active control of the Ministry of Power. Lots, actually, lots of them. If I recall correctly, in one of the issues raised by the Auditor-General, I think there was about 4 billion transferred by the Ministry of Power to for what it called the Mambila and Zugeru projects, and there was no evidence of how those funds were spent, and that is 4 billion naira of public funds. Your guess is as good as mine as what those could do. And then there was this issue of 95 billion naira, also raised by the Auditor-General, that was paid to contractors for various projects. And the Auditor-General could not see any documentation that the projects either existed or were executed. And I've just mentioned 2 of the various issues found by the Auditor-General. And even if the Auditor-General said 1 naira cannot be accounted for, it's a major problem. How much more these many issues found by the Auditor-General about spending public funds that simply could not be accounted for without due process, and particularly in such a very important ministry as the Ministry of Power. And given what we've seen, incessant collapse of the national grid, these are funds that could otherwise have been used to ensure that we have, at the minimum, 20 hours power in Nigeria.
Okay, now we move beyond demanding explanations now. Is SERAP now alleging that specific rules or laws governing public finance were violated in the release or the use of these funds?
The Auditor-General of the Federation is a public institution that is mandated under the 1999 Constitution to audit account of federal institutions, ministries, departments, and agencies. And the Auditor-General produces a report annually, also backed by the Constitution, that the Auditor-General submits to the Public Accounts Committees of the National Assembly. It is the Auditor-General that is making these allegations, and the document is a public document. Every Nigerian can download it on the website of the Auditor-General of the Federation, and you will see clearly the Auditor-General is making the allegation saying that the monies were missing, unaccounted for, and simply just misspent. And the Auditor-General was also very clear that he wants those funds recovered and paid back into public coffers. So it is not about SERAP making an allegation. It is an allegation by the Office of the Auditor-General of the Federation, statutorily empowered to do this job. He has done it, he has published a report, and it's with the National Assembly. And in this wise, Nigerians also have access to it to ensure that they follow up to hold those in the power accountable.
Now, looking at what you ordered, you were asking for the names and offices of officials who authorized this payment. Now, is this, that disclosure, is it critical to resolving this case?
If the Auditor-General is saying, for instance, 95 billion naira was paid to various contractors for projects that the Auditor-General could not see evidence of whether they were executed or even whether the projects existed or were executed, 95 billion naira. It's very important that we get to know the names of those contractors. And the Auditor-General has also alluded that the procurement process wasn't followed. And that is why it's very important that we know the names of those contractors, the basis of those projects, where those projects are located, how they were paid, were there a bidding process, for instance, in line with the Procurement Act, and what is the status of such projects. It's naturally what I would think that the anti-corruption agencies should be interested in to answer these pertinent questions. What we have simply done is to give the Ministry of Power and NBET an opportunity, perhaps, since this is a new administration, to clear the air, as it were, to explain what had happened to these funds, since the Auditor-General wasn't satisfied by what he saw when he was doing the audit in 2022.
All right. Now, thank you for your brief time with us. Now, we have the Kolawole, the Deputy Director of SERAP, digressing these issues. Thank you very much for joining us this very evening.
Thank you very much.